Anna Carter. Welcome to the show.
Perhaps another Midwest princess.
I'm sure there are some people, they probably think you're repressed and brainwashed by this patriarchal Catholic Church.
I've had hundreds and hundreds of conversations. Men, women, across the United States, internationally. That is a very common story for people with LGBTQ experiences. Being raised in one environment, chafing against it, it feels like the whole world opens up. Falling in love with a girl for the first time and being like, I don't know what to do with this information.
I wanted to talk about Chappell Roan, the songwriting and the pop sensibility that has really good guitars and really good drums and an edge and a grittiness to it.
They're playing Hot to Go and my child swim meet.
Let her cook. Let's say there's somebody listening right now and they find that, oh my gosh, I have these feelings. I might be in love with my best friend. How do you go about starting to navigate that? It can really kind of eat you up inside.
You can be part of the reason LGBTQ people don't need to feel isolated in the church.
Holy crap, Anna. That cut straight to my heart. I don't know if I have the courage to pray that.
Do people say the phrase menstrual cycle on your podcast? But it just happened.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Welcome to Pop Culture Catechism, conversations about music, movies, and the longings of the human heart. Let's get started.
Before we get started with the episode, I got to talk to my longtime faithful listeners and viewers for a second. So if this is your first time here at Pop Culture Catechism, just skip ahead like 30, 60 seconds and we'll see you in a minute for the full episode. My listeners, my people, thank you so much for sticking with me. I know the past year and a half I have not posted much. We've only had a few episodes, and just thank you for your support. Many of you have reached out to me. I appreciate it so much. Here's the long and short of it. We're back. We're starting season 5. And the main reason that hasn't been posting so much is Pop Culture Catechism and Awakened Catholic are officially parting ways, and I will be producing and running the show pretty much solo from this point on. There's no bad blood. Nick Delatorre, who runs Awakened Catholic, and I are still good friends. We talk almost every week. We'll still probably collaborate in the future. You'll probably see him on future episodes. There's no bad blood. We're just doing different things now. So what that means is I really need your guys' support. So if you've never been a patron before, I'm inviting you once again to become a patron. Go to popculturecatechism.com. It's the same website, but I do have a new platform through which I am taking patrons. So if you've been a patron before, I'm going to invite you to go to popculturecatechism.com and renew your subscription to be a patron, and then that will cancel your old subscription. The good news is more of that money now will come to me, and less will go to like editors and producers and that sort of a thing, because now the brunt of the work is falling on me, which I'm kind of excited about. I get to learn more about video editing and kind of renew my artistic vision. The second part of this is I'm going to be focusing a lot of my efforts on YouTube. That's where podcasting is growing a lot right now, and where a lot of the people I want to reach, I think, will still be on the podcast platforms. I'm still working that out. But right now I'm focusing primarily on YouTube. I just want to say thank you so much for supporting me on this crazy dream I had a few years ago during the pandemic, and for supporting me. It's taken me places I never thought I would go. So I'm really grateful, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. I want to welcome to Pop Culture Catechism, Anna Carter. Anna, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you. You've been on my list of people to ask for a while, and I reached out through the Eden Invitation website, and shout out to Shannon who made this happen. And she's like, "Oh yeah, we've watched some of your shows. We know who you are." I was like, "Oh good," so they know I'm not too weird, or if I am weird, I guess I'm the kind of weird that they're okay with talking to. It was good to chat, and yeah, you've been somebody I've wanted to have a conversation with for a while, and when I started to hear Chappell Roan's music all over the place, I was like, who can I talk to about this? And I was like, I got to reach out to Anna and the people at Eden Invitation, because I think they would be good people. So thanks for saying yes, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Can you just tell the people who you are, and tell us a little about yourself and Eden Invitation?
Yeah. So I'm Anna Carter. I am the co-founder of Eden Invitation, which is a ministry, more than a ministry, really. I think in a lot of ways it's a community for primarily Catholics with LGBTQ plus experiences who want to live like faithfully in congruence with the teachings of the church. So we really provide opportunities for ongoing spiritual formation. We have small groups, we have local chapters, we've got an annual retreat that happens every fall. We welcome people really across a lot of different demographics. So we have men, we have women, we have people with kind of anywhere under that LGBTQ umbrella. So people experiencing same-sex desires, also people wrestling with, their gender and their embodiment, ages like 18, most people in their 20s and 30s. but we've got about ages like 18 into people in their 40s.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming to talk with us today. And this is a sensitive issue, a very personal issue for a lot of people. So listeners, I want you to know that, my heart is I have many friends and even some family members who are LGBTQ, gay, bi, queer, however, whatever language you want to use. And, so these are people that are close to my heart. Some are very close to the church. Some are kind of halfway in, halfway out. Some are very, very far away from the church. And I think it's something that's on the heart of a lot of Catholics and a lot of people today. So I like to acknowledge at the beginning of episode where we talk about some controversial stuff that there's probably going to be some stuff today that we say that you don't agree with, or there might be some stuff that we don't say that you're like, I can't believe they didn't mention this, or I didn't say they don't say that. And this is just two people having a conversation. And, what is a catechism? The name of the show is Pop Culture Catechism. A catechism is a way of learning about the faith. And so many of the catechisms through history have been dialogues. St. Thomas Aquinas wrote in a dialogue. St. Augustine wrote in a dialogue. The Baltimore Catechism was a dialogue. And so I believe that we learn from dialogue, learning from other people's experiences. So I invite you to listen today with an open heart. And if you have something to say, we'd love to hear about it in the comments. But we're here because we're trying to love people. We're trying to love God more. And we're just trying to learn from each other's experience. So Anna, tell me about you. Who are you? Where are you from?
Yeah, I am perhaps another Midwest princess. I grew up in Minnesota, and I really actually lived my whole life in the Midwest. I grew up in Minnesota. I went to Franciscan University, Steubenville for college. Served with Net Ministries, was a high school religion teacher for a while.
Okay, me too. Yeah.
I enjoy the outdoors, reading. And in case it wasn't clear, I guess I do experience attraction to women. Like I'm queer, so that is also part of my own story. It's not just like two straight people here talking about Chappell Roan today.
Gotcha. There's and we've talked about this on the show before. Do you have any desire to talk about the terminology of like gay, queer versus same-sex attracted? Is that something you want to talk about here? Like, is that something you have very strong opinions on, or are you kind of like,
I actually don't have really strong opinions on it. I think I use that terminology, and my ministry, Eat Imitation, will use that terminology. If you can permit me to sound a little bit philosophical, we use it phenomenologically, not ontologically. Don't worry, everyone. We're going to start talking about fun stuff soon enough. But I think the difference between
let her cook.
Saying, right, like I'm describing an aspect of my experience, right? Phenomenon. This is a phenomenon in my life that I'm experiencing, and I'm describing an aspect of it, and different words can fit with that at maybe different points and different seasons of my life, right? I'm not using it in a way that says, oh, this is like so foundational, like more foundational than my baptism or something like that, which I think sometimes in Catholic circles, I think that secular language can get flack for meaning something more than it does.
Yeah. So some people would object to even using words like gay or lesbian because people are saying, well, you're identifying yourself by your sexual desires. So I think, so what I hear you saying is that's not the way you're using. We just use it as a way of describing part of your experience. So
yes.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Cool. So I wanted to talk about Chappell Roan. I've like heard her songs just kind of wherever. Nobody listens to radio anymore, but I like at my kids' swim meets and stuff, I'll like hear it, and I just out in the world or browsing YouTube. So I've just kind of become aware of her, but I haven't had a chance to like really dive into her music yet. So I reached out to you, and it sounds like you know a thing or two about Miss Roan, and you've listened to a bit of her music. So can you tell us what you love about her music, or what have you found that you connect to?
I think it's interesting. I think it's so funny we're doing this now. It's like classic Catholics. We're like doing the pop culture thing a year after it blew up. But so obviously, she got really popular last summer and like moved into this like major like mainstream crossover popularity, right? Like prior to that, I think a lot of, for nomenclature, I'll just keep saying queer, but a lot of, maybe queer female artists were very niche. And this got this crossover popularity to the point where you're saying like, no, they're playing Hot to Go and my child's swim meet, And so that was just really interesting, I think, to follow last summer. And I think what I enjoy about it, I mean, they're just, I don't know, they're bops, maybe that's not the cool word to use for them, but they're well-constructed pop songs. They've got great hooks. Some of them are real earworms.
Yeah.
And also I think she's she's a really, really talented vocalist as well. Like her range, right? If you listen to her whole album and some of her other like singles that came out before and after The Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess, her vocal range is astonishing. Like it's really, really good.
I was listening to her Tiny Desk concert a few days ago, and I was like, wow, okay, she is legit.
Like, this is a talented person. Like, she's a talented person. And I think on a personal note, I wouldn't say I personally resonate with all of her songs equally in my own experience, but there were definitely like a few here and there where I'm like, oh, well, that just hits in a place, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Or, oh, that reminds me of 15 years ago or something like that. So,
I'd love to hear about some of those if it comes up in the conversation. I'd love to hear like what those lyrics are. For me, as a musician and a songwriter, a lot of times when I hear a song, I'm like, who wrote this? You know, did she write this? Is she co-writing? And she's co-writing with a guy named Daniel Nigro, who also is the co-writer for Olivia Rodrigo in both her albums. And I love all that stuff. We did an episode on Olivia Rodrigo a couple of years back. And Daniel Nigro was a rock musician. He was in a band. And so it's kind of this mashup of power pop and kind of punk rock. And it's different. You know, Chappell Roan is very different than Olivia Rodrigo in a couple ways, but just like the songwriting and the pop sensibility, but also it hits it. Like it has really good guitars and really good drums and just like kind of an edge and a grittiness to it that I really like. So just the craft of the songwriting and also the performance is just really, really excellent. So yeah, it's good. It's fun stuff.
If you've ever seen her like live in a concert, I haven't like seen it live, but there was one I watched like some clips that was streaming, and she's like running all around the stage. Like her energy level is insane. And I heard that in order to get ready for her shows, she starts jogging around her apartment and singing 2 months before the tour starts so that she can have the lung capacity to like run around and do all the kicks and stuff that she does while still singing like album quality and beyond with her vocals. Like it's insane. If you watch her like live at a, you know, I don't know, like at a venue or something like that.
Yeah, I saw her Grammy performance last year, and it's impressive. You can tell she's singing live.
Wait, the Grammys or the VMAs? I forget the one where she was dressed as Joan of Arc.
I don't think she was dressed. I didn't see that one. Yeah, I think it was the Grammys.
I think it was the VMAs. She did a show. Well, we can get into male-female stereotypes and the subversion of that happens in queer spaces later. But
well, Saint Joan of Arc, pray for us. All right, so Anna, the first thing I wanted to talk about is I wanted to talk about Pink Pony Club, and you were like, not that song. So first of all, I want to talk about like why. I think that's her most famous song, and it's kind of about this girl who it's kind of a juxtaposition between Midwest conservative, not that Tennessee is necessarily the Midwest, but it's more from more conservative red state and in West LA. So there's this juxtaposition between, you know, I was in Tennessee and now I'm going to West Hollywood to dance. I'm here in Santa Monica. And my mom is like, oh God, what have you done? Now you're a Pink Pony girl and you dance at the club. And so for me, what I was hearing was this story of a young woman who felt out of place in this very conservative type of world. And she goes to West Hollywood and is at this gay club, gay bar, and finds all this acceptance and finds like she finally belongs. And it sounds like that there's other songs of hers that you felt that you connected with more and were more common to your experience.
Yeah, well, no, and I think you're right. Like, I think one of the reasons that Pink Pony Club is such a pop, I think still like one of the top singles on Spotify, I'm sure, is for what you just described, right? I think that tension is a very common story, actually, right? For people with LGBTQ experiences is when, especially being raised in one environment, chafing against it, and then it feels like the whole world opens up, right? When you like come out and you're in this space surrounded by people who share your experiences and it feels like something new comes alive. I think that is a pretty common experience that resonates with a lot of people. And so hence it's, you know, its popularity. And I know a lot of people who that is their story too, you know. I do find it really interesting though, because I think that is like a stereotype too sometimes of like, oh yeah, like you were this like closeted person and then now you're like flamboyant and free at the club. And like, I also think that's not necessarily everyone's story.
Yeah.
And I think personally as a woman, I think there was some more of her songs that like grapple with like, what does it mean to like find this person, right? Or to fall for this individual. I think it's interesting that if you look at her like discography, like I'd say maybe a third of them are sort of like the club dance bop things, and maybe like 2/3 of them are more of this like interpersonal, like love yearning song, right? And some of those are still pretty poppy, some of those are more moody, but I found that to be really resonant, I think, especially with a lot of the women I know, that like the way that you were kind of made aware of your sexuality or experience of sexuality like wasn't because like you went out to this club, but it was because you like fell in love with one of your best friends, right? And then now you're trying to like figure that out. That seems like pretty common in the female experience from what I've encountered. And so, I mean, I think like Naked in Manhattan is a really good example of that. Like that's basically what that song's about. Good Luck Babe would be another one. That one got really popular at the end of last summer. Of just falling in love with a girl for the first time and being like, I don't know what to do with this information.
Yeah. Let's talk about Good Luck Babe. So some of these lyrics, I don't want to call it off, but you don't want to call it love. With her arms out like an angel through the car sunroof. I don't want to call it off, but you don't want to call it love. You only want to be the one that I call baby. You can kiss 100 boys in bars, shoot another shot, try to stop the feeling. You can say it's just the way you are. Make a new excuse, another stupid reason. So how do you figure that out? Okay, let's say there's somebody listening right now and a young girl or a boy, and they find that, oh my gosh, I have these feelings. I might be in love with my best friend. Do you have any advice for someone in that situation? Like, how do you go about starting to navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think it's important. I think there's like maybe two things that jump immediately to mind. One is that to try as best you can to be honest with yourself of like, oh no, this is an experience that is happening, right? Because I think I know a lot of people too that then they just like shove it down and be like, nope, that's not what this is. I'm not going to look at it. I make this joke and talk sometimes, but it's like, yeah, like how many of us, when there was something that felt like a big secret, like the deeper we buried it, like the healthier we felt, or like the better things worked out for us, right? And I think that goes across lines of sexuality, right? When we have these things that we're like, I don't know how to deal with it. Like the entire therapeutic profession, and for that matter, the sacrament of confession exists because people are like, you know what, this secret thing, maybe I should just bury it instead.
There's that children's story. I'm drawing a blank on exactly what it is, but the kid has a secret that he can't tell anyone, and he keeps getting fatter and fatter and fatter. You know the one I'm talking about? No. And then finally, eventually he like digs a hole and like whispers it into the hole, and he goes back to being skinny or whatever. But then like, some farmer finds the hole and it comes out in this big yell out of the hole, and then everyone knows. I'm drawing a blank on what the name of it is, but that idea that when you keep something that is very powerful within you, like such a secret to yourself, it can really kind of eat you up inside and feel like you're going to explode. When we talked about Schitt's Creek on this show, we had Peter Volk on it. He talks a lot in his ministry about the wounds of the closet, about how young queer people in the closet feeling like they don't know who to talk to, just feeling totally unseen, like they're carrying the secret that they can't share with anyone else. And that just breaks my heart, to feel like they feel like they have no one to talk to, no one to share it with, especially as a minister in the church, as someone who, I've worked a lot with youth and been a youth minister and a campus minister, to feel that, a young gay kid in my ministry would be so scared to share that with me or with somebody because of just, I don't know, the culture in the church, the doctrines of the church, maybe something interpersonal with me. I don't know. Do you have any advice around that or thoughts around that for how do we avoid the wounds of the closet? How do we help heal the wounds of the closet?
And I think what's interesting too is that like that experience is like dramatically different than it was. So I'm a millennial, and that experience is a lot more, I think, diverse even than it used to be, right, with young people, right? So maybe, and where I think there's like more instances where people are maybe closeted in different places, right? Because I think it's also very common, especially if you're a parent, you might be the last one to know about that, right? You might, and so there's still, I think the kid would still be experiencing some of that pain and that hiddenness in certain relationships, but maybe then in other places, They're naming something, they're trying to figure it out, they're in a messy situation, a situationship with somebody, like all of that could be happening while they're showing up to youth group lying to your face, And so I think that's something to really be aware of in this. And can you ask the question again?
Yeah, the question was, well, one for, let's say somebody who is quote unquote in the closet, how do you avoid the woundedness of that secret? And then I guess part two would be for friends and ministers, parents, how do we help young people to avoid those wounds? How do we be a place of compassion for them?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, making sure that, those of us that maybe have young people or people that are vulnerable in this way, no matter their age in our lives, is I think one, to make sure we are always speaking in ways that affirm human dignity. I think a lot of people that are in the closet or even not in the closet, right? Like I'm pretty public, I'm on the internet, like my sexuality is like on the internet, but I'm constantly scanning with my ears to tone. What tone do people use when they talk about people? What tone do they use when they talk about people with LGBTQ experiences? Because if someone claims to be a person of faith and makes jokes at other people's expense, says things that are dehumanizing, uses us versus them sort of language, then that tells me that there's something in that person's way of thinking about people with LGBTQ experiences that is dehumanizing. And so I'm less inclined to want to talk to them. And I'm public about this experience. Yeah. Let alone if someone's not. What are we hearing from the pulpit on Sundays? What are the Catholic influencers of the world saying? What is our tone? I think people really pay attention to that. So we can say, oh, I love you, but then also I'm having a slur about someone that doesn't look perfectly masculine or feminine that I see at the coffee shop behind their back. Like you're not a safe person then, right? And so I think to check our language and our tone is really important. And are we speaking with dignity?
Yeah, I agree with that so much. There's a priest who was one of my favorite priests, or still is one of my favorite priests. He's a great priest in our archdiocese. And he's like a great preacher. Some of the best homilies I've ever heard from him. But this was probably 2013, I was leading music for, I don't know if it was a mass or a holy hour or something. And I was all excited to hear him preach, but it just happened to be the same day that Washington, D.C. had same-sex marriage legislation. And the key phrase that I remember from his homily is that today Washington has become Sodom on the Potomac. Sodom on the Potomac. I just remember being like, I don't like it. Just came across as, literally fire and brimstone is where we get the language of fire and brimstone from the Sodom and Gomorrah story. So I can't imagine that any queer Catholic who was sitting there would have felt any sort of welcome or acceptance. And I say that as someone who teaches theology of the body, who I am 100%, drinking the Jesus juice. I believe everything in the catechism and everything the church says. And I give talks on Catholic teaching on sexuality and morality and those sorts of things. And, I affirm the Catholic teaching on sexuality between, one man and one woman in marriage, forever. But when I hear stuff like that is not speaking the truth in love. That is not how Jesus approached the Samaritan woman, even though he called her out. That's not how Jesus approached the woman caught in adultery, even though he called her out. That is not how Jesus approached Zacchaeus, the tax collector who was up in the tree trying to get a glimpse of him, even though Jesus called him to repentance. I don't think we have to choose between compassion means acceptance, and we have to compromise on the teachings of our faith and what the church teaches us about the beauty of sexuality, which I truly believe really is beautiful. It's not something that I think I kind of, because I'm Catholic, I kind of have to go along with this whole, anti-gay thing, but I really wish it didn't have, for me, I truly believe that the church's teachings on sexuality are super beautiful and accepting kind of a more worldly sort of sexuality where you say, well, just love is love. And, it doesn't matter about man and woman or complementarity, just as long as two people love each other, whatever that means. That's not me. But still, Sodom on the Gomorrah, we cannot then become, the sort of influences who are just all right, now we can say gay again, retarded again, that. I feel like that is not the gospel, and that's not what Jesus wants. He doesn't want this sort of, like you were saying, this us versus them kind of negative. Well, you gays just need to get back in line and, keep your
keep your weird sex stuff to yourself. I truly believe that we can have 100% truth, 100% compassion. And that's where Christ is. And that's what I'm trying to be, and that's why I'm trying to have conversations like this. And why I've had conversations like this with people who are queer and who are like, yeah, I'm Catholic and I believe everything in the Catholic Church says and I'm trying to live by it. And I've had conversations with other queer Catholics who are like, I'm Catholic and I love the Eucharist, but I'm not, I dissent from the church on these sexual teachings, because I feel like we need to be a place of love and compassion without compromising on the truth, but without compromising on the love and compassion too. And as much, I think a lot of people say, oh, well, if you reach out in love and compassion to queer Catholics, then you're watering down the gospel. And I actually think if you reach out with just condemnation and just the truth without the love and compassion, that's watering down the gospel. Because the gospel is not just, here are the rules, follow them or burn. Sodom on the Potomac. The truth and the fullness, not watered down of the gospel, is that compassion, going to meet people and befriend people. So anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a rant.
No, and I think there's deficiencies on all extremes, right? I think we see this around sexuality. We see this around political movement, right? When we're living on either extreme, we're going to be experiencing some kind of a deficiency. And I think the question I always ask is, you kind of look at, if you want to look at typical, like kind of one theory of virtue ethics, right, is that it's kind of in the middle between these extremes and we're holding them in tension. And I always think too of like Christ on the cross, right? And how he's like holding this tension of his like own person, right, as God and man, like suffering for our salvation, the tension of love, and really trying to find myself, find my center, so to speak, in the heart of Jesus, right? And what is the heart of Jesus in this moment? And sometimes that does involve suffering in different ways, but like, what is the heart of Jesus in this moment and in this space? And that's where I want to be acting out of. I think sometimes when I hear the John 6 story told, it's like, oh yeah, remember he corrected her. He corrected her is like what we like to emphasize. But what I actually find really
fascinating. This is the woman caught in adultery?
Yeah, the woman caught in adultery. So to recap the story, right, there's a woman comes before Jesus, like she's dragged before Jesus by the religious authorities, and they say this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Where the man is, who's to say? Got out the window, I guess. And this is the story where Jesus says, the one of you without sin, you can cast your stone first. Because stoning, like throwing stones till someone died, was the punishment for that. He said, okay, well, whoever hasn't sinned, you can throw a stone first, right? And then eventually they all go away. And then he says to the woman, like, see who's left to condemn you, right? And then he tells her to go and sin no more. And I think when we tell that story, a lot of people want to emphasize that Jesus does speak to her of like, don't go sin anymore. But what I find fascinating is Jesus does that completely in private. And what everyone thinks Jesus is doing is something kind of crazy. Right? The thing he is doing in front of the public eye is actually against the Mosaic covenant. So he's actually standing with this marginalized sinner in a way that's incredibly controversial to the people around him. It's so interesting to me because I think we tend to emphasize like the fact that Jesus said, go and sin no more, which he did, but he did it in private and in the context of relationship. What people around him saw, which was also a true act, he wasn't being dishonest. What he did in the presence of the religious authorities was actually something really scandalous, which was to like subvert the Mosaic law, which was like condemning her to death, right? And he's not enforcing it in this moment in public with all these other people, which is kind of scandalous. And they all leave.
Well, if you're watching the show, you know that we had to switch things a little bit, the background change, but we're going to continue on here with the conversation. And one of the songs you said that you wanted to talk about was Naked in Manhattan. What in this song speaks to you?
I feel like it kind of goes into similar themes from Good Luck Babe in a way where I feel like there's something about this that really resonates with that experience I was mentioning earlier of like, I think a lot of women who experience same-sex desires, you're kind of in this place of like the person that you like is someone close to you and you're trying to navigate, do I like move into something or do we not, right? And I think in, whether it's a secular space or an experimental space, it's not even a matter necessarily of like the chastity question, which we would be asking as Catholics, obviously. Yeah. But I think in this space, it's also a question of like, do I risk this? Like, do I risk this friendship? What do I do with it? And I think this is also one of the songs where she actually grapples with faith. I think in some interviews, she said that she was like raised kind of conservative Christian in Missouri, went to church camps. But she doesn't really address religion in her songs. But this one she does. Like, she like overtly references hell. And so I think this is one where it's like, if you're from a religious background and you know what it's like to like a friend or like somebody and wonder what you should do about that, and or shouldn't do about that, that's what this song is about, basically.
I want to read a few of the lyrics. It says, "Hi, it's Chappell. I know you just landed and I know you're probably busy, but I would love to see you. So call me when you can. New crush, high school love again, the rush of slumber party kissing. Don't touch, I'll never cross the line. So I pushed you down 1,000,000 times. I'd love if you knew you were on my mind. Constant like cicadas in the summertime." Ooh, that's good songwriting. Constant like cicadas in the summertime. That's good. "Boys suck and girls I've never tried." Interesting. "And we both know we're getting drunk tonight. So we could go to hell, but we'll probably be fine. I've never done it. Let's make it cinematic." So it does seem like she's, kind of will they, won't they sort of thing. My question is that I'm sure is on a lot of people's minds is, why wouldn't she just go for it? Why not just have the love? And I'm sure there are some people listening that would look at you, Anna, and they probably think you're like repressed and brainwashed by this patriarchal Catholic Church. And why doesn't she just go and dance at the Pink Pony Club and find a girlfriend? And wouldn't she be much happier than having these old celibate men in Rome tell her what she can and can't do? Why are you living the way that you live?
Yeah, that's a great question. One that I still ask myself every few months sometimes. But I think I'm really grateful in the Catholic faith, I think, to have such like a rich exploration of like, what does it mean to be a person of faith, and to have a lot of tradition in addition to like proof texts from scripture. I do find that really fascinating the more that I meet Protestants with these experiences. And I think you can see this in like this song, like "Could Go to Hell, but Will Probably Be Fine" from Chappell Roan. Like, there's sort of this like kind of a what you have to like base your theology on is like Sodom and Gomorrah, Leviticus, some quotes from Paul, and they're all really harsh and really intense. I mean, Leviticus is like, if you do this, you should be killed, you should be executed. Wow. Yeah. And so if that's all you have to talk about sexuality, I don't know. Like, I don't stay. Like, if that's all we had, like, I think that's really challenging. Whereas I think within the Catholic worldview, it's just so much richer about, well, okay, what does it mean to be human? What is the human body for? What is the gift of sexuality, and how is it inseparably entwined with fertility, right? And what does that mean? And what does it mean for us to exist in this creative world? And also, what do we do with our desires, right? I think there's a lot of unrequited love in Chappell songs and plenty of pop songs. But I think within Catholicism, we also have this like really rich tapestry of like, no, like we can actually long for the eternal feminine, the eternal masculine, and find that in God's heart. Like, there's a mystical impulse to the Christian life that's just bigger than like, oh, I guess I want to have sex with somebody, right? Like it's so much bigger and more beautiful. And I think those things all really appeal to me. I mean, they appeal to me intellectually, they appeal to me emotionally. And I think I found a lot of richness in my experience of the Catholic faith.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And forgive me if I'm asking questions that are too on the nose or too personal. And this is a podcast, so we can edit stuff out afterwards. If you anything you're like, we can snip that out, just let me know. We can snip anything out, because I know I'm asking you very personal questions to talk about with strangers on the internet. So first of all, just thank you for being willing to do that. And I want to make sure you know that I respect that. What if I can ask another personal question again? We can slip this one out too if you don't. What if you get a crush? What if you fall in love? Like, what do you do? How do you handle that?
Yeah. Well, people handle that a lot of ways, but I think for me, it kind of depends on who it is, right? And how that manifests. Because I think for me, I do still experience attraction to women that hasn't like gone away. It's shifted over the years, like how I experience it or when it's stronger or who I'm attracted to even. I feel like, my type, so to speak. So all that's, I think, shifted over the years. And so I think when I do experience that attraction, I think there's a curiosity that I want to have about it. And be like, okay, all right, Lord, here we are. This is what I'm experiencing. What's the draw here? Like, what am I looking for? What do I want? Is there something I feel like is missing in my life? Are there other areas where this, could be the goods that I am curious about, or the goods that I'm hungering for are available in other places, right? And trying to be attentive to that. And I think when it comes to interactions with people, just trying to be prudent and willing people's good, and making choices that don't, flare that up into a bonfire, so to speak. But also not like cutting it off, right? I think there's, plenty of times I've been attracted to somebody where it's like, okay, well, this is a person in my life. This is a friend, or this is an acquaintance, and they're in my life, and that's not going to change. And so I just be prudent in how I interact in that,
Yeah, I feel like I can relate a little bit, and obviously it's not going to be exactly the same from my perspective, but as a married man, I've been married 14 years at this point, and, there's definitely other women I'm attracted to, and, women that I interact with are a part of my life. And in some cases, I also know my type, and I know what is bad news for me. And so there have been cases where I've met someone out in the world, and I've been like, not going to be friends with her, just like I need to cut that off and just keep my distance, because I know that's not going to be good for me. It's not going to be good for anyone. And even though I think she's super great in a lot of ways, like, nope, we're not going to be friends. But then there's other situations where you were saying I try to use it as a point of reflection, saying, all right, what's going on with me? Is there something that I'm longing for that I'm not getting in other ways, either in my relationship with my wife, or maybe I'm just like not going out and having enough like excitement in my life. Maybe I need to go on an adventure with the boys, or with my wife, or with the kids, or something like that. And so it can be a real point of reflection, just for like, what is lacking in me, and how can I fulfill that in a way that is healthy for me and isn't going to blow up my whole world and everyone I love's whole world. And how can I be a man of honor in that way? So yeah, I feel like there's a little bit there that I can relate to. Because like sex is never going to fulfill you, it's never going to fill that hole within you that only God can fill, and only like solid, healthy relationships can fill. But it often seems like it can. Yeah.
And then it doesn't. And then that's what the breakup songs are about.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like it's been good for me to listen to these songs. I try to be a person that listens. I try to be a person that listens to other people's experience. That's part of why I do this podcast, but also just listen to my friends, especially people who think very differently than me and live very differently than me. And so I feel like it's been good for me to hear Chappell's lyrics and just read some of her interviews and listen to some of her interviews, because it seems like what I hear in her song is I'm hearing a story I haven't heard before from her perspective of coming of age and trying to figure all this out. I think it defies some of the stereotypes of, a young queer person.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think in, the work that I do, right, I've had hundreds and hundreds of conversations with people from men, women, from across the United States, internationally. And I think it just reminds me that, like, obviously stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason, but there is no one story, right? There's no just one story. And I think sometimes in some religious spaces, I notice this, right? Where there's this assumption that like, oh, if someone is like identifying as LGBT, they're going to look a certain way, they're going to act a certain way, they're going to talk a certain way, they're going to see themselves and identify a certain way. And I think that's just not true. Like, right? There's this reality. And I think there can be pressure like that. I think one thing that I found really interesting about the whole saga of Chappell Roan last summer was that she was getting there's a lot of pressure on her from a celebrity perspective, because people were really interested in her life. And so there was this pressure for her to kind of define the words she was using and to show up as in a certain way, like as some sort of representative of the queers or something like that, And I wonder sometimes too, if that can like trickle down. It's not just celebrity, right? But I think there can be a trickle down that I see in myself sometimes, but also in young people of this like, oh, if I use this label, does that mean I'm in this box? Right? Or if I have this experience, does that mean I need to now start wearing flannel as a woman? Like, do I do I need to like be butch or something?
Yeah.
Or for a man, like, does this mean that I need to like dress a certain way, or my voice inflection needs to be a certain way? Like, there's these stereotypes that maybe we can glom onto from the outside and from the inside. I think we see this in some of Chappell's lyrics. Like, there's a clear wrestling in some of her songs. I think of like California in particular. It's almost opposite of Pink Pony Club, where in the song California, she's in California and she's literally like, come get me out. Like, I miss the seasons in Missouri. I want to go back. Like, there's something about that place that's also constitutive of me as a person. And that's one of the other things I love about being Catholic, is because we have this beautiful teaching about, John Paul II, I think, emphasizes it so well about how we are unique and unrepeatable. And I think that's super important for myself to hear, and also for young people, that recognition of like, no, like I might have this experience. I can see this experience in myself. And I need to be honest about it, but I also need to be honest about all these different aspects of the complexity of my life. And all of that comes together in my whole person, right? This doesn't have to be like the chief thing about myself, but it is real. But there's a lot of other parts of me that are really real too. And I think we need to be in touch with that within ourselves, and I think within the people that we love, right?
Yes.
The way that we're interacting with people as like whole complex people, you know?
Yeah, that idea that we are like unique and beloved and unrepeatable, that God has made us, and there's so much complexity to us. And one of the things I really love about Eden Invitation is because in my work with young people, I found so many young people that feel like they didn't have anybody to talk to about this stuff. And I feel like Eden Invitation, among the many things you do, is a place where people can go and share what their experience is and hear the experiences of other people, those each unique, unrepeatable experiences, and feel accepted and not judged and loved, and with some guidance. So anyway, just want to thank you for your ministry that you're doing with the church. Are there any other things about Chappell Roan that you want to talk about before we have our final thoughts?
No, I mean, I don't think so. I think we hit a lot of different things. I think she's a really interesting artist today. I think if you are, someone with a queer experience listening to this, obviously we want to be prudent, because with a lot of pop, like her lyrics are pretty explicit. Yeah. And so there's maybe certain times of my, menstrual cycle, I should not listen to her songs, right? That's part of prudence in the Christian life. And also part of the female experience. I don't know. Do people say the phrase menstrual cycle on your podcast? But it just happens.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I do think that's important, right? For all of this stuff, for all this, like, it's like, I think we just hold pop culture, right, with loose hands, and it's important to be aware of that stuff. But yeah, I think there's just, I think I'm excited. I think, to your point, I think it's cool that there are also like different stories, right, being told about these experiences. I think both sacred, right, maybe is what we're trying to do through Invitation, but also secular, as is happening, with Chappell Roan and other artists with LGBTQ experiences.
Well, at the end of my shows, I always ask my guest if there is a kind of closing thought or a gospel takeaway. What's one thing from this conversation that after we close down the episode, you'll still be thinking about after you go forward? What's your takeaway? Or I can go first if you want.
Yeah, why don't you go first?
So my takeaway is that kind of that last point you talked about, where we are unrepeatable and loved by God as an individual, like that each one of us is unique and we don't have to fit into a certain experience. And I know even as a straight man, there can be stereotypes and pressures on me to be a certain way. And so, yeah, I just love that. And listeners, for any of you that are struggling with who you are or your attractions or anything that we've been talking about, or just going through a hard time, just remembering that the love of the God of the universe is with you and in your heart, and that he loves you and he made you unique and unrepeatable, and that you are beloved. I think that's one to take home and to meditate on and think about.
I think another gospel message I would hear in this too is, I think, the importance of community. I think we started that kind of up at the top of talking about maybe that narrative of coming from a place where you felt really isolated in your experience and then going to a place where you suddenly weren't isolated anymore. I think there's a lot of people who are maybe raised Catholic or Christian who don't experience belonging in the church, and then they go find it someplace else, right? I think that's the story of this young woman we're talking about today, right? This artist. And I think that is just a travesty, right? That we don't have those places. And so I think the importance, I think, of cultivating that, even if we don't maybe have the authority, right? Maybe like a priest is listening to this podcast and there's things he can do at his parish or something, but we don't have to wait. I think, and that's one of the lessons I learned through starting Eden Imitation was like, we don't have to wait for someone else to make good community for us. Like we can do it, right? We can reach out a hand in love and care and invitation, right? We can read good books. Like we can laugh together. Like we can do karaoke and go to adoration. Like, wow, you can do it all. And so to be initiators of communion where you are, right? You can be part of the reason LGBTQ people like don't need to feel isolated in the church. Like you can be part of that solution by your love and just stepping out in faith.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I often ask my guests to close us in prayer. Would you mind praying for us?
Yeah,
praying with
absolutely.
us? Listeners, let's take a moment to pause and pray.
Father and the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Good and gracious God, we thank you for the ways that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We thank you, even if it's hard to say, we thank you for ways we experience things that maybe can't be satisfied the way we want them to here on earth. Because you allow that, Lord, for us to know that we're made for you. Help us first and foremost, God, to feel belonging in your heart. Help us to experience your love for us today. And we pray that you would make our hearts like yours, that we can reach out in love and in truth and in joyful invitation to a life of discipleship, a life in your Holy Spirit. Lord, we also pray for all of those who were raised in church, Catholic and Christian, who are away more formally right now, specifically because of their sexuality and gender. Lord, we pray that your Holy Spirit would come and just meet them today in a new way, that even if they are maybe outside the structure, we know that they're not outside your heart. So we continue to pray just for an awareness of your nearness in people who have felt like they had to reject you in order to be happy. Pray that you'd be especially close to their hearts today. Amen.
Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So, wow, as you were praying that prayer, God, I thank you for the desires that go unfulfilled in me because they remind me that I'm made only for you. Like, holy crap, Anna, that's like, that like cut straight to my heart. I was like, oh my gosh, wow, that is, I don't know if I have the courage to like pray that. Man, I'm gonna write that down and like I'm gonna need to wrestle with that one for a little while. That's really good. I just want to thank you so much for helping a Neanderthal like me navigate these very sensitive topics, and for just the work that you're doing for the church and for your heart for the Lord and his people. So thank you so much. If people want to find out more about you and more about Eden Invitation, where should they go?
You can go to our website, www.edeninvitation.com. And if this is your experience and you want to get connected to us, you click on the community. There's like a little tab for community, and you can actually sign up to talk to one of our volunteers and get connected pretty much right away. So that's the way you can get connected. And if this isn't your experience, you can still check out the website, right? We do have a lot of blogs and other podcast interviews, and there's ways to support our mission as well. If you think ministries like this should continue to exist in the church, you can support us financially, and that's all. You can find that all online.
Get you guys a new web router, Wi-Fi router.
Yeah, right.
Somewhere listening, there's a donor who can help us with this problem. And some AC. That's great. Awesome. Well, thank you, Anna. Thank you, listeners, for coming with us on this conversation, and just for listening, and especially on topics like this. Like I said at the beginning, there's probably some things we said or didn't say that might have you feel in some kind of way, and I just want to thank you for being here and being willing to listen to different people's perspectives. And if you have something you feel like you need to add in charity and love, even if it's a little spicy, you can throw that down in the comments, and we'd love to read them. I want to thank in a special way all our listeners, and if this has touched you, if you think this has been, if something in what we said has been burning in your heart, I really encourage you to share it with somebody. Just take a screenshot or copy the link and text it to somebody and say, hey, I think you'd be interested in that. And that's a little way that you can share the love of God with somebody, but also it's a way that helps out the show. If you love this show and this show is like your favorite thing going on, I invite you to go to popculturecatechism.com and become a patron and give on a monthly basis. And that helps me run this show and helps feed me and my wife and my kids. And then you also get access to all the talks I give in my speaking ministry and lots of exclusive content that I make just for those patrons. In a special way, I want to thank Carl and Melissa Gore, Lisa and Bob Tenney, and Steve and Maggie Hubbard, who support this show every month. Thank you, listeners, for following all the way to the end here. Thank you, Anna, for all that you're doing and for this conversation. I know you're busy and you're doing a lot of work. And thank you, listeners. We love you. Jesus loves you more. We'll see you next time.
Do you love the message that you just heard? Would you like to share it with your church community or school? You can bring me as a speaker or musician to your church community. Just go to miketenneymusic.com and there's a little contact form there that you can fill out, or you can send that to the people at your parish, church, school, whatever, and they can invite me that way. And I love online stuff, and if you want to share this episode with people, that's great. But I think we all know that the way that hearts and minds are really changed most of the time is in person, and I love doing in-person talks and parish missions and all that sort of thing. So if you'd like me to come out and speak to your people in person, I would love to do that. Go to miketenneymusic.com.